A 35-year-old white American, Ethan Caldwell, walked into any room as if he owned it. As the CEO of ApexTech, a leading tech conglomerate in New York, Ethan had built an empire out of bold ideas and relentless ambition. At an age when many were still searching for their footing, he already owned a mansion on the Upper East Side, a garage full of gleaming supercars, and a packed schedule of elite parties where billionaires and celebrities vied for his attention. With neatly trimmed blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a confident smile, Ethan wasn't just a symbol of success. He was a master of the power game. To him, life was a chessboard, and he was always the winner. But behind the glittering exterior, Ethan carried an emptiness he rarely admitted. Success had come too fast, too easily, leaving him constantly searching for new challenges to prove himself. His friends, mostly heirs and young entrepreneurs, often gathered to brag and bet on ridiculous games, from buying yachts to seducing famous models. Among them, Marcus Reed, a venture capitalist, and Ethan's close friend from college, always pushed boundaries. Marcus knew precisely how to provoke Ethan's pride with his sly smile and mischievous eyes. One Saturday afternoon, as the golden glow of sunset bathed the streets of Manhattan, Ethan and his friends decided to do something unusual: stop by a modest McDonald's in Harlem. For them, it was a joke, an attempt to experience the lives of ordinary people, as if playing a role in a comedy. The restaurant was crowded. The smell of fries filled the air, and the children's laughter mingled with orders called out from the counter. Clad in an Armani shirt and a gleaming Rolex, Ethan looked out of place among working-class families and high school students. He sat in a corner booth, sipping Coca-Cola, while Marcus and two other friends, Julian and Tessa, laughed about the adventure. "Ethan, you've done it all, haven't you?" Marcus said, his voice full of challenge. "You've made billions, bought an island in the Caribbean, and could have anyone begging for a date. But I bet there's one thing you can't do." Ethan raised an eyebrow, a half-smile spreading across his face. "Go ahead, Marcus. You know I never turn down a challenge." Marcus leaned in, eyes gleaming with mischief. "I bet you $2 million that you can't marry someone completely out of your league. Not a supermodel or a businesswoman. I mean a regular person like that waitress over there." He tilted his head toward the counter, where a woman was quietly wiping tables with focused intent. Ethan followed his gaze. The woman was Sarah Thompson, a 28-year-old Black American with curly hair tied neatly at the back of her neck and deep brown eyes that radiated resilience. Sarah wore a McDonald's uniform, moving swiftly between tables, clearing trays, and responding to customers with a gentle smile. She was a single mother to Maya, a 5-year-old girl, and her job at McDonald's was how she supported her daughter. To Ethan, Sarah had been invisible, a part of the background he rarely noticed. But Marcus's challenge made him look closer, and a thought flashed through his mind. This was a chance to prove that there truly was nothing he couldn't achieve. "Marry that waitress." Ethan repeated, his voice tinged with surprise and amusement. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Marcus replied, taking a sip of soda. "No contracts, no tricks. A real marriage. If you pull it off, $2 million is yours. If not, I'll remind you of this failure for the rest of your life." Julian and Tessa laughed, clearly thinking this was just another of the group's ridiculous bets. But to Ethan, $2 million meant nothing. He'd made more than that from a single deal. What thrilled him was the idea of a new challenge, a game he could control and win. With her simple life and completely different world, Sarah was a unique opponent. He smiled, raising his soda as if making a toast. "All right, Marcus, get the money ready because I'm going to win." The group roared with laughter, convinced they were witnessing the start of yet another easy win for Ethan Caldwell. But deep down, Ethan felt a surge of new adrenaline. This wasn't just a bet, but a chance to cement his reputation as a man who never failed. He glanced at Sarah again as she chatted with a coworker. Her smile tinged with weariness, but still warm. She was a puzzle, and Ethan was always good at solving puzzles. As the group left McDonald's, Ethan dropped a large tip on the table, a customary display of his generosity. But this time he made sure Sarah saw it, his way of announcing his presence. She picked up the money eyes, scanning him indifferently before returning to work. That fleeting coldness stirred something in Ethan, a flicker of irritation and a spark of intrigue. He knew this game wouldn't be as easy as the others, but that only made him more determined. On the drive home, cruising through streets glowing with city lights in his Bentley, Ethan began to strategize. He would approach Sarah and capture her attention with his charm and wealth. Then he would convince her he was the man she couldn't say no to. To Ethan, everything was a matter of strategy, and Sarah Thompson was just another target. But he had no idea that his rules would be overturned entirely in Sarah's world, where love, responsibility, and resilience reigned. Ethan Caldwell wasn't used to being rejected. In his world, a snap of his fingers could open the doors to any exclusive club, and a smile was enough to make those around him eager to please. But Sarah Thompson, the waitress at the McDonald's in Harlem, seemed utterly unaffected by his charm. After the bet with Marcus, Ethan returned to the restaurant on a quiet Tuesday afternoon as the sunlight faded and the crowd thinned out. He sat in a familiar corner, pretending to scroll through his phone, though his eyes were fixed on Sarah. With smooth brown skin and deep brown eyes, Sarah moved between tables with quiet focus. She wore her McDonald's uniform, her apron slightly wrinkled but clean, and her curly hair neatly tied at the back of her neck. Her posture radiated strength, like she had learned to stand firm against all odds. A single mother to Maya, a bright-eyed 5-year-old girl, Sarah worked long shifts to pay rent and preschool tuition. She rarely complained, but in moments when she stood alone behind the counter, her slightly slumped shoulders revealed the pressure she kept hidden. Ethan watched her from afar, trying to find an opening. He had a plan: approach her with his usual charm, ask her out for coffee, and from there, build a relationship to win the bet. But as Sarah came close to wipe the table next to him, Ethan suddenly felt awkward, a foreign sensation. She was nothing like the women he encountered at elite parties, women who eagerly responded to his attention. Sarah didn't seem to notice his presence, or if she did, she didn't care. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat, flashing the confident smile he'd rehearsed in the mirror 100 times. "Hi there. Sarah, right?" he said, leaning back in his chair, trying to appear relaxed. "I'm Ethan. I don't have had the pleasure of being served by you." Sarah paused, her eyes briefly scanning him as if assessing whether he was worth her time. She wiped the table a little faster and responded in an even tone. "I've been working here for a few years. You probably just never noticed. Can I help you with something?" Ethan hesitated. He had expected a different reaction, perhaps a bashful smile or a hint of curiosity. But Sarah regarded him with the bare minimum of politeness, clearly wanting to return to her duties. He decided not to give up. "It's just, I thought it might be nice if we talked a bit. Do you ever take a break to grab a coffee? I mean, not now, but whenever you're free." Sarah stopped wiping, stood upright, and looked at him with sharp eyes. "Listen, Ethan, right? I'm swamped. I have a daughter to care for, and this job doesn't give me much free time. Thanks for the offer, but I have to work." She turned away, carrying her water bucket and cleaning cloth, leaving Ethan with a rare sense of failure. He frowned, not because of the rejection. He could handle that, but because of how she rejected him. She wasn't being arrogant or playing hard to get. She didn't care. That left Ethan both confused and intrigued. He wasn't used to trying hard for attention, and Sarah's indifference made him want to try again. This was no longer just a bet with Marcus. It was becoming a personal challenge. In the following days, Ethan became a regular at McDonald's, always showing up during Sarah's shifts. He tried different approaches, ordering cheerfully, leaving generous tips, even asking about small details like how she kept the tables spotless. But Sarah kept her distance, answering briefly and returning to her work as soon as possible. Still, Ethan began noticing things about her he hadn't expected. He saw how she smiled at a child who dropped their fries, how she quietly helped a stressed-out coworker, and how her eyes lit up when she mentioned Maya. Those moments made Sarah feel real, in a way he rarely saw in his artificial world. One evening, as the restaurant neared closing, Ethan decided to try a different approach. He waited until Sarah had cleared the last table, then stepped forward with a gentler tone. "Sarah, I know you're busy and don't want to intrude, but I want to get to know you. Just one coffee, 15 minutes. I promise I won't waste your time." Sarah looked at him, eyes narrowing as if searching for his true intentions. She sighed and set the cloth down. "You're the persistent type, huh?" she said, folding her arms, her tone tinged with fatigue and a hint of curiosity. "Why are you interested? I mean, look at you. Expensive clothes, shiny watches. You don't belong here. So why keep coming back?" Her question caught Ethan off guard. He couldn't tell her the truth about the bet, but he didn't want to lie outright either. "Maybe because you're different from the people I usually meet," he said, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "You seem real, not fake. I want to understand that." Sarah looked at him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to believe him. Finally, she nodded, though still cautiously. "All right, Ethan. One coffee. But in just 15 minutes, I chose the place. I've got a morning shift tomorrow, so don't expect me to stick around." Ethan smiled, feeling as if he had just cleared a major hurdle. "Thank you, Sarah. You won't regret it." As Sarah returned to the counter to wrap up her shift, Ethan stepped out of the restaurant, adrenaline surging through his veins. He had opened the door just a crack, but as he climbed into the waiting Bentley in the parking lot, he couldn't help but wonder, why did this feel so thrilling? This was just part of the bet. Yet something about Sarah's steady gaze, her honesty in facing life, had planted a seed of curiosity in him, something even Ethan didn't fully understand. Ethan Caldwell was not someone who gave up easily. In his world, persistence was the key to closing multi-million-dollar deals, acquiring rival companies, and maintaining his position in New York's elite circles. But Sarah Thompson, the waitress at the McDonald's in Harlem, was a challenge of a completely different kind. After she reluctantly agreed to a 15-minute coffee, Ethan felt he had secured a small victory. But he knew the door into Sarah's world had only just begun to crack open. He was determined to draw her closer with his charm and wit, believing the bet with Marcus was just a game he would win. On Friday afternoon, Ethan arrived at the small cafe on 125th Street that Sarah had chosen, a humble spot with old wooden tables, the rich aroma of roasted coffee, and soft jazz music floating from the speakers. He got there early, wearing a simple navy blue shirt, forgoing his Rolex to appear less ostentatious. He sat by the window, watching people pass by, wondering why he felt nervous. He reminded himself this was just another step in the plan. Yet Sarah's steady gaze had lingered in his mind since their last meeting. Sarah walked in right on time, still in her McDonald's uniform, though her apron had been removed and neatly folded into her bag. Her curly hair hung loose, and her brown eyes held a cautious gleam. She sat across from Ethan, arms folded, as if constructing an invisible wall. "She began in 15 minutes, as I said." Her voice was even, but not cold. "I have a shift tonight, and Maya's home with my grandmother. So, what do you want to say?" Ethan smiled, trying to stay casual. "Thanks for coming, Sarah. I just wanted to get to know you. What's your life like? Working at McDonald's must not be easy, right?" He chose a safe question, hoping to ease into a light conversation. Sarah raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed by his effort. It's not easy, but I manage. I work to support Maya, pay rent, and keep our life steady. And you, Ethan? What do you do that gives you the time to sit in McDonald's asking strangers out for coffee? Her tone conveyed sarcasm, but her eyes were curious, as if testing him. Ethan chuckled softly, sensing her sharpness. I'm the CEO of ApexTech, a tech company. The job keeps me busy, but I like discovering new things like meeting people like you. He leaned in slightly, trying to appear sincere. You seem very real, not like the people I usually meet. Sarah looked at him momentarily, then sipped her coffee, perhaps to hide a faint smile. Really? So, what kind of people do you usually meet? The rich ones in fancy clothes who never worry about the end-of-month bills. Her voice was gentle, but the question cut cleanly, highlighting the gulf between them. Ethan hesitated. He had expected small talk, but Sarah had no interest in that. Yes, mostly, he admitted, choosing to be direct. They live in penthouses and talk about stocks and yachts. But honestly, those conversations can feel empty. You're different. I see you work hard and want to know what keeps you going. Sarah tilted her head slightly, her expression softening, though still guarded. What keeps me going, Maya? She's why I get out of bed every day, no matter how tired I am. I dreamed of becoming a teacher, but when I got pregnant with Maya, I had to drop out of college. Things didn't go as planned, but I have no regrets. I do everything so she can have a better life. She paused, as if surprised at how much she had just shared. And you, Ethan? What keeps you going? Her question silenced Ethan. He was used to answering inquiries about business strategies or investment plans, but this was too personal. What kept him going? Money power. Or just the habit of winning? I like challenges, he said. After a moment, his voice lower. I like the feeling of achieving something no one thinks I can. I enjoy sitting here with you. Sarah laughed. A soft, genuine sound lit up the corner of the cafe. You don't give up, do you? All right, I'll give you points for persistence. She glanced at her watch, then stood up. 15 minutes are up. I need to go pick up Maya. Thanks for the coffee, Ethan. You're not as bad as I thought, but don't expect me to say yes so easily next time. Ethan stood with her, feeling both disappointed and energized. Will there be a next time? He asked, the smile returning to his face. Sarah shrugged, her eyes twinkling with a hint of mischief. Maybe, if you still feel like wasting your time. She turned and left the cafe, leaving Ethan with a strange feeling. He had expected an easy victory, but Sarah was unlike any opponent he had ever faced. She wasn't swayed by appearances or smooth talk. Instead, she made him think about himself, about what he truly wanted. On the way home, sitting in his familiar Bentley, Ethan couldn't shake Sarah's image from his mind. Her rare smile, how she spoke about Maya with fierce love, and that question caught him off guard. He still told himself this was part of the bet, but deep down, a spark of curiosity had been lit. Sarah wasn't just a target. She was a woman with a story, and for the first time, Ethan wondered if he could truly understand it. Meanwhile, Sarah boarded the subway, the weight of her bag heavy on her shoulder. She thought about Ethan, his near-arrogant confidence, and that moment when he grew quiet after her question. Something in him, a fleeting sincerity, made her agree to meet again, even though she told herself to keep her distance. Maya was Sarah's only priority and had no time for games. But as the train swayed and carried her home, she couldn't deny that Ethan had sparked a flicker of curiosity, even a little. Ethan Caldwell had never lacked confidence when making bold decisions. As CEO of ApexTech, he had turned outrageous ideas into reality, from acquiring rival startups to launching products that reshaped the tech industry. But standing in front of Sarah Thompson, the McDonald's waitress from Harlem, he felt a new kind of pressure. After their brief coffee meeting, where Sarah reluctantly agreed to see him again, Ethan returned to the restaurant nearly daily, armed with persistence and a smile sharpened by hundreds of high-stakes negotiations. He believed that with time, she would be drawn to his charm, and the bet with Marcus would end in victory. Sarah, with sharp brown eyes and the resilience of a single mother, kept her distance. She noticed Ethan's presence, but constantly reminded herself that Maya, her 5-year-old daughter, was her only priority. Still, she couldn't deny that Ethan had a certain appeal, not because of his money or appearance, but because of the rare moments when he let his sincerity slip through. For example, when he asked about her dream of becoming a teacher, or how Maya loved to draw, their brief conversations at McDonald's gradually became more familiar, though Sarah maintained clear boundaries. One quiet Wednesday evening, with the restaurant nearly empty and neon lights flickering on the street, Ethan decided to accelerate his plan. He had waited carefully to win the bet. He needed to do something bold, something big enough to convince Sarah that he was serious. As she was cleaning the last table, he approached, hands in his pockets, voice low and steady. "Sarah, I've been thinking a lot about us. This might surprise me, but I want you to be my wife." Sarah froze, the cloth in her hand falling to the table. She turned to him, eyes filled with disbelief and shock. "What did you say?" Her voice was low, as if trying to process a ridiculous statement. "I want to marry you," Ethan repeated, locking eyes with her. "I've never met anyone like you, Sarah. You're real strong, and we could build something special. I want to give you and Maya a better life." Sarah crossed her arms, narrowing her gaze. "Ethan, we've only met a few times. You barely know anything about me. And I certainly know nothing about you except that you're rich and persistent. Do you expect me to believe this is real?" She shook her head, her voice tinged with frustration. "You live in a completely different world. Why me? Why now?" Her question cut through Ethan's confident facade like a blade. He couldn't mention the bet, but knew he had to convince her. "Because you're different," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "I live in a world full of pretense. But you make me want to be a better man. I know this is fast, but I believe in what I feel. Just give me a chance." Sarah stood silent, her eyes wavering between skepticism and a flicker of curiosity she couldn't hide. She thought about Maya, the sleepless nights, worrying about rent, the dreams she'd had to leave behind. Ethan's proposal, as crazy as it sounded, came with a promise, a stable future for her daughter. But her heart warned her it could all be a mistake. "Ethan, I'm not the kind of person who jumps into major decisions without thinking," she said, voice low. "Maya is everything to me. If I agree, you have to promise to respect our life. No games, no secrets." Ethan nodded, a wave of relief and pressure washing over him. "I promise, Sarah. I'll do everything to make you and Maya happy." He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring, elegant but not flashy. He had chosen it carefully, knowing anything too extravagant would push her away. Sarah looked at the ring, her heart pounding. She wanted to say no, to run from this wild idea, but the image of Maya growing up in a safe home with opportunities she never had made her hesitate. After a long, heavy pause, she exhaled. "All right, Ethan. I'll say yes, but for Maya. And if I ever find out you're dishonest, I'll walk away immediately." She held her hand, letting him slip the ring on, though her eyes remained guarded. Ethan smiled, feeling as if he had just closed the biggest deal of his life. But deep down, he knew this was no longer about the bet. Something about Sarah, her strength and authenticity, made him want to prove himself worthy. They held a small wedding ceremony just weeks later, attended by Maya's grandmother, and a few of Sarah's co-workers. Ethan invited a few friends, but Marcus wasn't one of them. He didn't want any reminders of the bet at that moment. Sarah and Maya moved into Ethan's mansion on the Upper East Side, a lavish home with soaring ceilings, marble floors, and windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. To Maya, it was a magical castle, but to Sarah, it felt cold and unfamiliar. She stood in the grand living room, gripping Maya's hand, wondering if she had made the right decision. Ethan, standing beside her, noticed the tension. "Welcome to your new home," he said gently. "I want you and Maya to feel like this is yours." Sarah nodded, but her eyes were distant. "I hope you keep your word, Ethan," she said quietly. "Because if you don't, Maya and I will return to where we belong." She led Maya upstairs to her new bedroom, leaving Ethan alone in the opulent room, the thrill of victory already fading. He had convinced Sarah, but he knew the real journey was beginning, and it wouldn't be as easy as the deals he was used to winning. Meanwhile, Sarah sat beside Maya's bed, reading her a bedtime story and trying to keep things normal. She glanced at the ring on her finger, its silver glow catching the light. She had entered Ethan's world for Maya's sake, but her heart remained filled with doubt. Was he sincere, or was this just another rich man's game? As Maya drifted to sleep, Sarah looked out the window at the glittering city lights and said she would protect her daughter no matter what came next. Sarah Thompson stood in the vast living room of the Upper East Side mansion, feeling as if she had stepped into a museum rather than a home. The pristine white walls were adorned with million-dollar abstract paintings. The marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers, and the floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the Manhattan skyline. For Maya, her bright-eyed 5-year-old daughter, the place was a magical castle where she ran freely and pointed at expensive antique vases as if they were toys. But for Sarah, a 28-year-old black woman who had grown up in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in Harlem, everything here felt unfamiliar and cold. Just weeks after their modest wedding, Sarah and Maya had moved in with Ethan Caldwell, a 35-year-old white American and CEO of ApexTech. Accepting Ethan's proposal, though, primarily for Maya's future, still left Sarah conflicted. She wore the silver ring on her finger, but every time she looked at it, she wondered if she was trading herself away for a dream that wasn't real. Ethan, with his blonde hair and confident blue eyes, had tried to make her feel at home. He'd hired a decorator to design Maya's room in pastel pinks with bookshelves full of children's stories. He even toned down his lavish parties to spend more time at home. But Sarah could still feel the gap between them, not just in class, but in how they viewed life. The early days in the mansion were a series of challenges for Sarah. She wasn't used to housekeepers cleaning up or a chef preparing meals. When she tried to cook Maya's favorite dish, a simple pasta, the housekeeper, Mrs. Clara, looked at her with a mix of surprise and disapproval. "Mrs. Caldwell, we can take care of everything," Mrs. Clara said, her tone polite but firm. Sarah forced a smile, but inside she felt like an intruder. She wasn't Mrs. Caldwell. She was still Sarah, the woman who once worked night shifts at McDonald's to keep the lights on. Maya, on the other hand, adapted quickly. She loved the backyard garden where she chased butterflies and drew with chalk along the walkway. One afternoon, as Sarah sat watching Maya play, Ethan appeared still in a suit, but looking more relaxed than usual, with his tie off. "She's full of energy, isn't she?" he said, sitting beside Sarah on the wooden bench. "I've never seen a kid so happy with just a tree." Sarah nodded, her eyes softening as she watched her daughter. "She finds joy in the little things. I've always tried to protect that in her, even when life wasn't easy." She paused, then looked at Ethan, her voice quieter. "This place, It's so different from what we're used to. I'm not sure I belong here. Ethan frowned, sensing her unease for the first time. Sarah, I want you and Maya to feel like this is home. If anything feels off, tell me. I'll fix it. He spoke earnestly, but Sarah only offered a faint smile without replying. She knew he was trying, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was living inside a play where she didn't see the script. The differences became even clearer during a dinner party Ethan hosted to introduce Sarah to his friends. It was the first time she met people from his world, entrepreneurs, investors, and a few models with perfect smiles. Sarah wore a simple black dress Ethan had gifted her, but she still felt out of place among designer gowns and conversations about yachts and stocks. One woman introduced herself as Tessa and gave Sarah a curious look. So what did you do before you met Ethan? Tessa asked sweetly, though her tone carried an edge. I worked at McDonald's, Sarah answered plainly without hesitation. She saw Tessa freeze for a moment, her smile faltering. How interesting, Tessa said quickly, changing the subject. Sarah could feel the glances around the table, and she clenched her hands beneath the tablecloth, struggling to stay composed. Sitting beside her, Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder as a gesture of support, but to Sarah, it felt more like she was being put on display. After the party, after the guests had left, Sarah sat in the living room, staring at the glittering city. Ethan walked in still in his suit, his hair slightly tousled, as if worn from a long day. You okay? He asked, sitting beside her. I know tonight might have been a lot. Sarah sighed and turned to him. Ethan, I don't belong in your world. Those people looked at me like I was a puzzle they didn't want to solve. I'm here for Maya, but don't know if I can live like this forever. Her voice trembled slightly, but her eyes remained steady. Ethan fell silent, feeling helpless for the first time. He had believed that money and care would be enough to make Sarah happy, but her words hit him like a cold splash of water. I don't want you to feel that way, he said quietly. Just give me time, Sarah. I'll do everything I can to make you feel comfortable. Sarah looked at him, searching his eyes for truth. She wanted to believe him, but her heart was still doubtful. I hope you mean that, Ethan, she said, standing and walking toward Maya's room, where her daughter lay asleep with a book on her chest. Sarah sat beside her, brushing the girl's hair back, whispering that she would protect Maya no matter what it took, even if that meant leaving this world behind. Meanwhile, Ethan stood alone in the living room, watching Sarah's silhouette disappear down the hallway. He thought about the bet with Marcus about how this all started, and for the first time he felt a twinge of regret. Sarah wasn't a target in some games. She was a woman with dreams and fears, and he had pulled her into a world she never asked to enter. As he stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the city lights, he asked himself if he could truly change, not just to win a wager, but to become the man Sarah and Maya needed. Ethan Caldwell had always lived in a world where everything could be measured, profits, stocks, or the number of people willing to follow his lead. However, a few weeks of living with Sarah Thompson and her 5-year-old daughter Maya showed him that some things had no price. The Upper East Side mansion, with its marble floors and expensive artwork, had once symbolized his success. Now, it had become the stage for a challenge he'd never prepared for: being a husband, being a father, and facing a woman who wasn't dazzled by his wealth or power. Sarah, a 28-year-old black woman, remained cautious within Ethan's luxurious world. She spent most of her time caring for Maya, ensuring the little girl didn't feel overwhelmed by the drastic change. Sarah read bedtime stories in Maya's pastel pink room each night, clinging to old routines to help her daughter feel safe. But inside, she continued to struggle with her decision. Though wrapped in promises of a better future for Maya, Ethan's proposal was still clouded by doubt. What did he honestly want? She glanced at the silver ring on her finger, how it glinted in the light, reminded her she had entered a gamble she didn't fully understand. With his blonde hair and piercing blue eyes, Ethan began to realize that Sarah was unlike anyone he had ever known. She wasn't impressed by his money or influence, and her quiet strength, how she faced judgmental glances at the dinner party, or kept smiling when Maya asked about the old house, made him curious. One afternoon, coming home early from the office, he found Sarah and Maya in the backyard. Maya drew with chalk along the walkway, while Sarah sat on the grass gently guiding her daughter with a tenderness that stirred something in Ethan's chest. "She's excellent," Ethan said, walking over and sitting beside Sarah, trying to appear casual. "I've never been good at art stuff like this." Sarah smiled, her eyes still on Maya. "She loves being creative. I always let her draw freely, even if it makes a mess." She paused, then turned to Ethan, her voice soft but pointed. "Have you ever done anything for fun, not for a goal or reason?" The question left Ethan silent. He thought about his life, all the endless meetings, million-dollar deals, and social events meant to preserve his image. Everything had a purpose. Victory, control, reputation. Probably not, he admitted quietly. But watching Maya, I think I could learn. Sarah raised an eyebrow, surprised by his honesty. Learning from a 5-year-old. That's a good start, Ethan. She stood, brushed the grass off her pants, and called Maya in for dinner. Ethan watched them walk away, feeling a strange warmth. For the first time, he wanted to stay right there in that simple moment, instead of chasing his next ambition. Ethan began to change in the following days, even if he didn't fully realize it. He started cutting back on evening meetings to come home earlier, joining Sarah and Maya in small, ordinary things. One evening, while Sarah was helping Maya with homework, Ethan volunteered to assist with a collage project. Maya, eyes sparkling, giggled as Ethan accidentally glued a paper scrap to his hand. "You're so silly," she squealed, and Ethan laughed, a sound that felt surprisingly natural even to himself. From the kitchen doorway, Sarah watched them with mixed feelings. She saw Ethan trying, and how patient he was with Maya, but her doubts lingered. She had once believed in promises like the ones Maya's father made before walking out when she needed him most. She wasn't going to repeat that mistake. "You're doing a good job," she said when Maya ran off to grab more colored paper. "But don't let her get too attached, Ethan. If you're not serious, she's the one who'll get hurt." Ethan looked at her, his expression serious. "I am serious, Sarah. I don't have experience, but I want to get this right." He wanted to say more, but his phone rang, a call from the office, and he sighed, stepping away to answer. Sarah watched him leave, sensing that the wall between them still hadn't come down. Another evening after Maya had gone to bed, Sarah and Ethan sat in the living room under soft lighting, the glow casting gentle shadows on the paintings. Sarah held a cup of tea while Ethan sipped a glass of wine. "Do you ever think about your family?" she asked, her voice curious. "I mean, before all this, the mansion, the company, everything." Ethan was caught off guard, but answered, his voice quiet. "My mother, she gave up a lot to raise me. She worked double shifts to get me into a good school. But I rarely talk about it. When I became successful, I thought I repaid her by buying her a house. But now I realize, all she wanted was my time." He paused, his gaze distant. "You remind me of her, Sarah. The way you care for Maya, it's special." Sarah stayed silent, moved by his openness. For the first time, she saw in Ethan who wasn't a polished CEO, but a man searching for something more profound. She said quietly, "I'm not sure there's anything special about me. I do what needs to be done. But thank you." That moment, brief as it was, became a small bridge between them. Yet when Sarah stood to leave for bed, she still felt a distance. She wanted to believe in Ethan, but her past broken promises Lonely nights worrying about Maya kept her guarded. She looked back at him one last time before walking away, wondering if this man could truly change. Ethan remained alone, thinking about the bet with Marcus. It had once been his only motivation, but now the moments with Sarah and Maya made him wonder if he was playing a much bigger game, a game whose rules he no longer understood. Looking out the window at the flickering lights of Manhattan, he felt a new desire not to win, but to become someone Sarah and Maya could trust. Ethan Caldwell, a 35-year-old white American and CEO of ApexTech, had begun to feel a shift within himself. The quiet moments with Sarah Thompson and her 5-year-old daughter Maya, from helping with collage art to late-night conversations, had shaken the foundations of a world built on power and prestige that he once believed was everything. Yet deep inside, Ethan still carried a secret. Their marriage had started as a bet with Marcus, a game that now felt more and more foreign to him. But another, more profound and more devastating secret was about to unravel the fragile walls they were building. Sarah, a 28-year-old black woman, remained cautious in the Upper East Side mansion that Ethan called home. Though she saw his efforts, how he spent time with Maya, and listened when she spoke of her dream to become a teacher, she still couldn't fully trust him. The luxury, the maids, the elegant dinners, the elite lifestyle made her feel like she was borrowing a life that didn't belong to her. But for Maya's sake, Sarah tried to adjust, hoping Ethan would prove that he wasn't just another wealthy man making empty promises. One Saturday morning, while Maya played in the garden with her visiting grandmother, Ethan sat in his home office, reviewing old ApexTech files. One report caught his eye: the closure of a manufacturing plant in a small town a few hours outside Harlem 6 years ago. At the time, Ethan, then 29 and fiercely ambitious, had ordered the shutdown to cut costs and increase profit margins. To him, it was just business numbers on a spreadsheet, not lives. But as he read further, his heart stopped. The factory had been located in Sarah's hometown. With trembling hands, Ethan dug deeper, uncovering the impact of that decision. Hundreds of jobs were lost. The local economy was weakened, and families were forced to relocate. One of the names on the termination list stood out: Sarah Thompson. She had been working there while pregnant with Maya, and the plant's closure had pushed her into financial despair, forcing her to move to Harlem and take a job at McDonald's to survive. Ethan felt as though the ground beneath him had collapsed. The heartless decision he had long forgotten had rewritten the entire course of Sarah's life. The rest of the day, Ethan couldn't focus. He watched Maya playing in the garden, laughing carelessly, and thought of Sarah's struggle, the struggle he had helped cause. He knew he had to tell her the truth, even if it meant destroying everything. That evening, after Maya had fallen asleep and her grandmother had gone home, Ethan asked Sarah to join him in the living room. The soft lighting highlighted her face, her deep brown eyes filled with strength and fatigue. "Sarah, I need to tell you something." Ethan began, his voice unsteady. He sat across from her, his hands clenched as if holding back the weight of guilt. "Do you remember the plant in your hometown, the one you worked at before Maya was born, the one that closed down?" Sarah nodded, her expression darkening. "Yes, I remember. That was one of the most challenging times in my life. I was pregnant with Maya, and when the plant closed, I lost everything: my job and my stability. I had to start all over." She paused, looking at him with a mix of concern and suspicion. "Why are you asking about that?" Ethan took a deep breath, feeling as if standing at the edge of a cliff. "Sarah, it was my company ApexTech shut down that plant, and I was the one who made the decision." The words landed like a stone in the stillness. "At the time, I only saw numbers. I didn't think about the people affected. I didn't know you were there. But now that I do, I can't forgive myself." Sarah stared at him, her gaze shifting from shock to hurt. She stood backing away, as if trying to distance herself physically. You're the one who did that. Her voice trembled nearly a whisper. You're the reason I lost my job and struggled to raise Maya. And now you sit in this house pretending to care about us, Sarah. I'm not pretending, Ethan said, standing and stepping forward, but she raised her hand to stop him. I didn't know then. If I had, I swear I would have done things differently. I'm sorry. I want to make things right. Make things right. Sarah let out a bitter laugh, tears welling in her eyes. Do you think an apology erases the nights I stayed up, wondering how I'd pay rent? The days I skipped meals so Maya could eat? You destroyed my life, Ethan, and now I'm living in your house wearing your ring. It isn't kind. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself, as if shielding her body from pain. Ethan felt as if his chest were caving in. He wanted to hold her, to promise he would fix everything, but he knew words meant nothing now. Sarah, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I promise I'll do everything possible to compensate for it. Just please, don't leave. Sarah looked at him, her eyes burning with hurt and fury. I need time, Ethan. I don't know if I can stay here, not for me, but for Maya. She doesn't deserve more heartbreak. She left the room, leaving Ethan alone in the silence of his opulent home. Sarah went straight to Maya's room and sat beside her sleeping daughter, staring at her angelic face. Her tears fell silently, but she wiped them away, determined not to let Maya see her broken. She thought of the years of hardship, how she had rebuilt her life from nothing, and now the man she had started to trust was the source of that pain. Holding Maya's hand, she promised to protect her daughter, even if it meant walking away from Ethan. Still in the living room, Ethan stared out the window at the Manhattan skyline, now just a blur of soulless lights. He thought of the bet with Marcus, how it had led him to Sarah and the factory decision that had changed her life. He didn't feel like a winner for the first time, but the man who had inflicted damage. And he knew now he had to make amends not just for Sarah, but for himself, to become the kind of man he had never imagined he could be. A 28-year-old black woman, Sarah Thompson, stood at the edge of trust. After Ethan Caldwell confessed, he was the one who ordered the shutdown of the factory in her hometown, throwing her into hardship while she was pregnant with Maya. She had asked for time. Though the pain lingered, she tried to carry on for Maya, her 5-year-old daughter, growing attached to Ethan and the Upper East Side mansion. But Sarah had no idea that another, even cruel secret was waiting to destroy whatever remained of their fragile relationship. Ethan, a 35-year-old white American and CEO of ApexTech, was drowning in guilt after confessing about the factory. He respected Sarah's request for space, but found ways to remain close to her and Maya. He cut down on meetings to come home earlier, read bedtime stories when Sarah was tired, and quietly observed how she bore her wounds with grace. Though the bet with Marcus echoed in his mind, it had lost meaning. What mattered now were the moments with Sarah, her eyes when she spoke of her dream, to teach her rare smile, when Maya gave her a handmade drawing. Those moments mattered more than winning ever had. One Friday night, as Sarah tucked Maya into bed, Ethan sat in his home office, reviewing documents tied to the old factory. He was looking for ways to make amends, perhaps a relief fund for the families affected. But the office door swung open before he could finish drafting the proposal. Marcus Reed, his old college friend, entered with his usual smirk. With tousled brown hair and glittering eyes, Marcus had always resented Ethan's effortless success. He had been silent since the wedding, but Ethan's transformation had unsettled him. "Look at you, Ethan," Marcus said, leaning in the doorway, voice dripping with sarcasm and playing house. I thought the bet was just for laughs, but you're serious about the waitress. Ethan's jaw tightened, discomfort rising. Marcus, not now. Sarah and Maya are not a joke. He stood, hoping to end the conversation, but Marcus laughed louder. Sarah, just leaving Maya's room, heard the voices. She turned to walk away, but the word bet froze her. Her heartbeat quickened, dread washing over her. She stepped in, eyes sharp, as they moved from Ethan to Marcus. A bet, she asked, voice low and cold. Marcus turned, surprise flashing in his eyes, quickly replaced by amusement. Oh, Sarah, you're here. Ethan hasn't told you, he said, eyes gleaming. I bet him $2 million he couldn't marry someone like you, a waitress, someone not from our world. But hey, it looks like he won. The room fell into stunned silence. Sarah looked at Ethan, waiting for him to deny it. But his face had gone pale, his blue eyes wide with panic. Sarah, let me explain, he began, but she raised a hand, eyes shimmering with tears. Is it true? She asked, voice trembling. Our marriage, was it a bet Maya and I were? We just a game to prove something to him? She pointed at Marcus, her voice breaking like glass. Sarah, it started that way, but it's not like that now, Ethan said, stepping toward her, voice desperate. I've changed. I love you. I love Maya. That bet doesn't matter anymore. But his words sounded hollow, like a defense too weak to erase the truth. Sarah stepped back, her eyes blazing with betrayal. You love us, she scoffed, tears streaming down her cheeks. You destroyed my life with that factory. And now I find out this marriage was a joke. Do you think I can believe anything you say? She turned to Marcus, her voice like ice. Congratulations, you won. Then she ran from the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. Ethan turned to Marcus, rage igniting. How dare you, he growled, grabbing Marcus by the collar. You ruined everything. Marcus shrugged, pushing him off. I just told the truth. If she can't handle it, that's her problem. He walked out, leaving Ethan behind, gutted. Sarah rushed into Maya's room, forcing herself to stay calm and not to wake her. She began packing a few essentials, clothes, storybooks, a drawing Maya had made for Ethan. She couldn't wait another minute. When Maya stirred and groggily asked, "Where are we going?" "Mommy." Sarah hugged her tightly and whispered, "We're going home, baby, just you and me." She led Maya out of the mansion, hailed a cab, and vanished into the Manhattan night, leaving Ethan and his world of wealth behind. Ethan stood at the front door, watching the cab lights fade into the distance, a wave of helplessness crashing over him. He wanted to run after them to explain, but he knew his words would mean nothing now. He returned to the house, collapsed onto the sofa, and silently bowed his head. Sarah's face flashed in his mind, her rare smile, fierce eyes, and how she held Maya. And for the first time, Ethan realized he loved her, not because of the bet, not for the challenge, but because she was the only person who had ever made him want to become a better man. But the truth had shattered everything, and he didn't know if it could ever be repaired. Sarah tucked Maya into bed in a small apartment in Harlem, trying to hold herself together. She sat by the window, staring at the familiar street below, tears falling quietly. She had opened her heart to Ethan. She had hoped he was different. But in the end, it had all been a game. She held Maya's hand, vowing never to let her daughter be hurt again. But deep inside, a part of her still ached for Ethan, not the arrogant CEO, but the man who laughed with Maya and spoke softly about his mother. She shook her head, trying to silence the thought. For Sarah, trust had died, and she wasn't sure it could ever be resurrected. Ethan Caldwell, A 35-year-old white American once believed he could control everything from ApexTech's multi-million-dollar deals to the hearts of those around him. But when Sarah Thompson left the Upper East Side mansion with her 5-year-old daughter Maya, carrying the pain of 2 betrayals, the factory closure and the bet with Marcus Ethan, realized he had lost the most precious thing in his life. With its pristine walls and crystal chandeliers, the grand mansion was now just a space echoing his loneliness and guilt. Sarah, a 28-year-old black woman, returned to the small apartment in Harlem where she had lived before meeting Ethan. She rented it again, using her little savings, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for Maya. Every night she read stories to her daughter and held her close, hiding her tears. The truth about the bet had driven the final dagger into her trust. She had begun to open her heart to Ethan and had hoped he truly cared for her and Maya. But now every memory of him playing with Maya and those quiet late-night talks felt tainted with lies. She vowed never to let Maya be hurt again, but deep inside, it still hurt to remember the moment Ethan spoke about his mother, as if he had once been someone she could believe in. Ethan, meanwhile, was drowning in helplessness. He stopped attending high society parties and cut all ties with Marcus, who now represented everything Ethan wanted to leave behind. He spent hours in his home office, not signing deals, but thinking about how to make things right. The bet and the factory closure hadn't just hurt Sarah. They represented the man he used to be, who placed profit and pride above everything. He knew an apology wouldn't be enough. If he wanted to earn back Sarah, he had to prove he had changed, not with words, but through action. After many sleepless nights, Ethan made a bold decision. He would walk away from ApexTech, the company that had defined him for the past decade. He reached out to investors, held closed-door meetings, and announced the sale of the company. The board was shocked, but Ethan stood firm. He told his advisor, "I needed a new beginning," his voice resolute. "This company is part of who I used to be, and I don't want to be that man anymore." After weeks of intense negotiations, he finalized the sale, retiring as CEO and relinquishing most of his wealth. He kept enough to live comfortably, but no longer owned the mansion or the sports cars. He had left behind the identity of a tycoon. At the same time, Ethan began making amends to the people affected by the factory closure. He drove to the small town where the plant had once stood, now reduced to a field overgrown with weeds. He met with former employees and listened to their stories of lost jobs, homes, and the fight to keep their families afloat. One older woman, Ms. Grace, told him she had to move away to find work, leaving behind the community she loved. Ethan confronted the real human cost of his choices for the first time, and the remorse burned like fire inside him. He committed to founding a relief fund, dedicating much of the money from ApexTech's sale to help families relocate, retrain, or start businesses. Ethan wrote a handwritten letter to Sarah, not a text, not an email, but a letter delivered by a mutual friend. In it, he didn't beg for forgiveness. He told her what he had done. "Sarah, I don't deserve you or Maya after what I've done, but I'm trying to make things right for you and everyone I've hurt. I've sold the company and worked with people from your hometown. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I want you to know I won't stop trying to become a better man." He signed the letter, his hand trembling as he folded it. Sarah received the letter one evening after putting Maya to bed. She sat by the window of her Harlem apartment, the streetlight casting a soft glow across her face. She read each line, her heart pounding with a swirl of emotions. Part of her wanted to rip the letter apart, to erase Ethan from her life forever. But his words, the admission of guilt, the decision to walk away from power, made her pause. She thought about Maya and how her daughter laughed when Ethan played with her. She wondered if he had changed. But the wounds from the bet and the factory still ran deep like scars that hadn't healed. She folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and chose not to respond. She needed time, and she wasn't sure she could forgive. Ethan, receiving no reply, continued his work. He returned to the town several times, collaborating with local organizations to implement the support fund. Every story he heard, from laid-off fathers to single mothers like Sarah, reminded him of the hardship he had caused. He didn't know if Sarah had read his letter, but he remained committed not to winning her back, but to becoming someone worthy of her and Maya. In the small apartment, Sarah watched Maya sleep, her eyes soft but heavy with reflection. She thought about Ethan's letter, the man he claimed to be now, and wondered if trust could ever be rebuilt. She didn't have an answer, but for the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope, not for Ethan, but for the possibility that maybe, just maybe, people really could change. Sarah Thompson, a 28-year-old black woman, had rebuilt her life in a small Harlem apartment after leaving Ethan Caldwell's Upper East Side mansion. She worked long shifts at a new coffee shop, saving every penny to care for Maya, her radiant 5-year-old daughter. Ethan's letter about selling ApexTech and creating a support fund for those affected by the factory closure remained in her drawer, unopened again, unread for weeks. The pain of the bet and the factory still lingered like an old scar, keeping her cautious, even though a small part of her sensed the sincerity behind his actions. Ethan Caldwell, now 35, was no longer the arrogant CEO of ApexTech. After selling the company, he moved into a modest apartment in Brooklyn and spent his days working with the support fund in Sarah's hometown. He met with families, listened to their struggles, and felt the full weight of his past decisions. Every day he thought about Sarah and Maya, the fierce light in Sarah's eyes, Maya's laughter while painting, and reminded himself to be patient. He didn't send more letters, didn't call, but hoped that his actions might someday speak louder than words. One Saturday morning, through a mutual friend, Ethan learned that Sarah and Maya would visit Prospect Park for a picnic. He invited them to a quiet gathering. Nothing extravagant, just an afternoon in the park. He sent a message through a friend. It was just a simple afternoon for Maya with sandwiches and games. No pressure. Sarah read the message, torn. Part of her wanted to refuse. But when Maya asked about Mr. Ethan, her eyes lighting up, Sarah softened. Just one afternoon, she told herself. This wasn't forgiveness, just a moment of peace. At the park, under lush green trees, Ethan laid out an old blanket and unpacked a modest meal: sandwiches, fruit, and juice. He wore a plain t-shirt and jeans, his blonde hair tousled in the breeze. When Sarah and Maya arrived, he stood and greeted them with a warm but reserved smile. "Thank you for coming," he said, his blue eyes quietly sincere. Maya ran straight to him without hesitation, hugging him tightly. "Mr. Ethan, I drew a new picture," she exclaimed. Sarah stood a few steps back, arms folded, her brown eyes cautious. She watched as Maya played with Ethan. He seemed different, less self-assured, more grounded. He patiently pushed Maya on the swing, laughing, when she spilled juice on his shirt. "You're good with her," Sarah said later, her tone even as they sat down to eat. "But this doesn't change anything." Ethan nodded without argument. "I don't expect it to," he said softly. "I just wanted today to be a good day for you and Maya. And I wanted you to know I'm still trying." He spoke briefly about the support fund and the families he'd helped, not to boast, but to be transparent. "I can't undo the past, but I can do right by it." Sarah listened, her gaze wavering between skepticism and reluctant curiosity. "Who are you doing this for, Ethan?" she asked sharply. "Me, or your guilt." Ethan met her gaze, voice steady. "It may have started with guilt, but now I want to be someone Maya and you can be proud of. I was wrong about the bet, the factory. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I won't stop trying." He paused, his expression softening. "You and Maya changed me." Sarah fell silent, eyes drifting to Maya playing nearby. She thought of the hard years, the pain, the resilience she'd built. But she also thought of Ethan laughing with Maya like a father would. "I don't know if I can trust you, Ethan," she said quietly. "I've been hurt before, and I won't let Maya go through that. If you're not serious, it ends now." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. "I understand. I'll prove it with time, not words." He stood and called to Maya to play tag. Her laughter echoed through the park. Sarah watched him. This man who no longer seemed like a billionaire, but like someone genuinely trying to find his way back into their lives. Still, she held her boundaries, reminding herself that trust must be earned. The afternoon passed in simple joys. Maya running across the grass, Ethan and Sarah chatting lightly about school Harlem, but not the past. Sarah packed their things as the sun dipped low, preparing to leave. "Thanks for today," she said quietly. "Maya had fun, but we still need to take things slow." "I'll wait," Ethan replied, eyes steady. "You and Maya are worth waiting for." He watched them leave, Maya waving goodbye over her mother's shoulder, and he felt hope for the first time in a long while. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he finally believed he was walking in the right direction. On the subway ride back to Harlem, Sarah cradled a sleeping Maya. She thought about this picnic, about Ethan, not as the man who once betrayed her, but as someone seeking redemption. She wasn't ready to forgive, but couldn't deny that today she had seen a different man. Looking out the window as the city lights blurred past, she asked herself the question she had avoided for weeks. Could she risk opening her heart one more time? Sarah Thompson, a 28-year-old black woman, had grown used to standing up after every fall. After walking away from Ethan Caldwell's mansion, she rebuilt her life in Harlem, working at a coffee shop and caring for Maya, her radiant 5-year-old daughter, whose smile could brighten even the darkest days. The picnic at Prospect Park weeks ago, where Ethan showed quiet change through humility and patience, had left a sliver of hope in her heart. But she remained cautious. Opening her heart again could mean risking more pain, not just for herself, but for Maya. Ethan's letter detailing the sale of ApexTech and his efforts to support families affected by the factory closure remained in the drawer. A reminder that he was trying, but trust could never be rebuilt in a day. Ethan Caldwell, 35. Ann White was no longer the arrogant CEO who once treated life like a chessboard. Living in a modest Brooklyn apartment, he dedicated himself to the support fund in Sarah's hometown, helping families find jobs and retrain. He kept his promise to Sarah to move slowly and never apply pressure. His messages were brief updates about Maya's notes on the fund's progress, but always respectful of her boundaries. Every time he thought of Sarah, her fierce brown eyes, the way she shielded Maya like a fortress, he felt more determined to prove that he had truly changed. Not to win her back, but to become someone she and Maya could one day rely on. After the picnic, Sarah agreed to meet Ethan occasionally, mainly for Maya's sake. They started with short visits to parks or cafes where Maya could play, while Sarah maintained her emotional distance. Ethan always arrived on time, dressed with blonde hair, tousled, and blue eyes, and quietly sincere. He brought small gifts for Maya, a picture book and a box of crayons, but never anything extravagant. He helped her with homework, listened to stories about school, and told silly jokes that made her giggle. Sarah watched, noting his patience, but constantly reminded herself that the past, the bet, and the factory couldn't be easily erased. One Saturday afternoon, they met at a Harlem playground. Maya raced down the slides, while Sarah and Ethan sat on a bench, sipping coffee from paper cups. "Maya says she wants to be an artist," Sarah said softly. "I'm saving up to buy her better paints. She draws all day, makes the whole place a mess." She smiled, her eyes gentle as she watched her daughter. Ethan chuckled, eyes lighting up. She's talented. Last time she drew me with a nose the size of a tomato. I still have that drawing in my room." He paused, voice lowering. "You're doing a great job, Sarah. Maya's happy because she has you." Sarah shrugged, but his words warmed her. "I'm just doing what I have to do. But thank you." She met his gaze for the first time, not looking away. "I heard your fund helped someone from my hometown. My friend's aunt got retraining support. You're doing something good." Ethan nodded, not boastful. "I'm just trying to make things right. Those people, they deserve a second chance, like you once didn't get." He looked at her, voice sincere. "Sarah, I know I can't erase the past, but I hope someday you'll see I'm no longer that man." Sarah was quiet, thinking of the letter, the afternoons with Maya, and how Ethan never pushed her. She wanted to believe him, but fear still anchored her. "Time will tell, Ethan," she said softly. "I need to be sure for Maya." Their conversation was interrupted as Maya ran over holding a wildflower. "Daddy, look what I found!" she shouted, offering the flower to Ethan, then stopped, eyes wide, realizing what she'd just called him. Sarah froze, heart racing. Ethan blinked, stunned. His voice caught as he looked at Maya with emotion, then turned to Sarah as if to apologize. "Maya, sweetie, you mean Mr. Ethan?" Sarah said gently, her voice shaky as she tried to stay calm. Maya nodded, still beaming, then ran back to play. Sarah turned to Ethan, her expression a mix of emotions. "She just made a mistake. But you need to be careful. She's getting attached." Ethan nodded, voice hoarse. "I know. I don't want to hurt her or you. I want to be here for both of you." He held the flower tightly, as if it were something precious. Sarah noticed the gesture, how tender, how deliberate, and felt a wall inside her begin to crack. The moment Maya called him, Daddy, was painful and warm, reminding her daughter that she needed a family. But she wasn't sure if Ethan could truly be part of it. Over the following weeks, their meetings continued, each one a small step in rebuilding trust. Ethan attended a parent-teacher meeting at Maya's school, quietly standing at the back, while Sarah spoke with the teacher. He brought Maya a new paint set, and she squealed with joy. One evening, Sarah opened up about being abandoned by Maya's biological father while she was pregnant. Ethan listened, no judgment or interruptions, and gently held her hand. He said, "You're stronger than anyone I've ever met," voice full of admiration. Sarah felt something shift, not through Ethan's words, but through his presence, consistency, and respect. Still, she kept her distance, fearing this fragile new trust could shatter like glass. One night after Maya had fallen asleep, Sarah opened the drawer and took out Ethan's letter again. She reread it slowly, thinking of his journey, Maya, and her heart. She wasn't ready to fully forgive, but for the first time she chose to give him and herself a chance. A 28-year-old black woman, Sarah Thompson, endured many trials since leaving Ethan Caldwell's mansion. Her small apartment in Harlem, with its peeling walls and the constant noise of the streets below, became her sanctuary, a place where she could rebuild a life for herself and 5-year-old Maya, whose radiant smile could outshine the grayest days. The regular meetings with Ethan, from Prospect Park to the Harlem playground, had gradually softened her heart. His patience, how he played with Maya, and his efforts to make amends through the Community Support Fund for those affected by the factory closure, convinced Sarah that perhaps he had truly changed. Yet the wounds from the wager and the factory still lingered like shadows, making her hesitate before fully opening her heart. Ethan Caldwell, a 35-year-old white man, was no longer the arrogant CEO of ApexTech. After selling the company, he lived a simpler life in Brooklyn, devoting himself to community service and slowly rebuilding trust with Sarah. He no longer chased power or prestige. Instead, he longed to become the kind of man Sarah and Maya could lean on. Every time Maya laughed, and Sarah looked at him with a little less wariness. He felt a joy no wealth could ever buy. But he knew that to earn Sarah's complete forgiveness, he had to continue proving himself, not with words, but with actions. One winter evening with Harlem lightly dusted in snow, Ethan invited Sarah and Maya to his apartment for Christmas dinner. His modest home with plain white walls and a small Christmas tree lit by colorful lights starkly contrasted his former Upper East Side mansion. Sarah stepped inside, clutching Maya's hand, her brown eyes still cautious. In her red coat, Maya squealed with delight upon seeing the tree. "Mr. Ethan, the tree's so pretty," she exclaimed, running toward the gifts beneath it. Ethan smiled, his blonde hair glowing under the warm lights. "I made it just for you, Maya. Want to open a present?" He glanced at Sarah, seeking permission. She nodded, a gentle smile forming as Maya opened a box of new paint supplies and squealed joyfully. Dinner was simple: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and cookies. Ethan had baked himself a gesture that caught Sarah off guard. "Didn't know you could cook," she teased lightly. "I picked up a few things from my mom," Ethan said, his blue eyes tender. "She always said a homemade meal is the best way to say, 'I care.'" His words silenced Sarah momentarily, stirring thoughts of the stories he'd shared about his mother and how hard he was trying to change. After dinner, while Maya played with her new paints, Sarah and Ethan sat at the table sipping hot tea. Sarah, Ethan began, voice low and sincere. "You and Maya have shown me what matters. I know I hurt you with the factory with the bet, and I'll carry that regret forever. But I need you to know I love you. I love Maya. Not because of some game, but because you two are the family I want to build my life with." Sarah looked at him, her heart racing. She thought about their journey from McDonald's to the mansion, betrayal, to quiet reconnection. She thought about his letter, the support fund that had helped women like Grace back home, and how Maya had become so attached to him. "Ethan," she said, voice trembling, "I've been scared for so long. Scared to trust you, scared Maya would get hurt. But I've seen you change. I want to try, but I need a promise, no more secrets or games." Ethan reached for her hand, gaze steady. "I promise, Sarah. No secrets. Only us." He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a simple silver ring engraved with the name Maya, inside a symbol of his commitment to them both. "Sarah Thompson, will you marry me again? Not because of a bet, but because I want to spend my life making you and Maya happy." Sarah looked at the ring, tears shining in her eyes. She thought of the years she had fought alone, and of the man in front of her, not a wealthy egotist, but someone willing to give everything up for love. "Yes, Ethan," she whispered, voice breaking. "For Maya. For us." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she felt true, unwavering trust for the first time. They held a small wedding in the spring, surrounded by close friends and family at Prospect Park, where their reunion began. In a floral dress, Maya tossed petals along the path, beaming as she called Ethan Daddy. In a simple white gown, Sarah looked at Ethan with eyes full of hope. They vowed honesty, love, and to build a family rooted in truth. 1 year later, Sarah and Ethan welcomed a baby boy named Noah. They continued to live in their Brooklyn apartment, where Sarah pursued her long-postponed dream of becoming a teacher. Ethan worked with community organizations, helping struggling families, and became a devoted father to Maya and Noah. Every evening, they read stories together and laughed in the quiet joy of home. And as Sarah looked at Ethan now, the man she truly loved, she knew she had found true happiness after everything.